everybody, Ty here. Hope everyone is doing well, prepared for Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving Eve, so I'm pretty sure a lot of people's houses are smelling good right now. Well, as we know, right after Thanksgiving, we're going to have a pretty big cold snap over the eastern half of the US in particular, and a pretty big pattern change as well in general. So hopefully you guys are stocked up on the firewood and preparing for that. Over the course of the next couple of days, though, we do still have some weather we need to address beforehand. Of course, we're going to talk about the cooler temperatures and the lake effect snow, but do have marginal chances of severe weather today and tomorrow. It's really going to be more so this evening with tonight's setup. There is a small, and I mean that with extra emphasis on small, chance of everything occurring here tonight across the deep south. It's going to probably be maybe a storm or two that might have the potential to maybe produce a brief tornado if you're lucky or unlucky, depending on, or for lack of a better term, I should say. Same thing with the damaging wind gust and hail threat at this point. The same thing exists for tomorrow. Slightly more broad, it's a more broad area, but pretty much the same deal here. Very widespread marginal risk for everything essentially. After that point, severe weather threat calms down. As you can see, not too many thunderstorms in the lower 48 in general, and really after that point, severe weather potential pretty much drops off after that. So not much to really worry about in regards to severe weather, but it's a risk nonetheless over the course of the next 48 hours. The real thing that we're going to be talking about, and it's really going to be confined to the Northeast, is going to be the winter weather side of things. Over here on this map here, we're looking at the 24-hour probability of snow accumulation up to 4 inches here. And you can see that the probabilities are greatest right now over towards the Northeast, mainly over towards the Adirondacks, over towards New York, and then of course over towards Vermont, New Hampshire, and of course Maine, where we have mostly mountainous terrain as well. So outside of that, it's really not going to be till, I would say, Friday where the lake effect machine starts to come into play, and we start to see those notable lake effect snow totals over towards areas like Cleveland, areas eastward over Lake Erie and Toronto. I think are going to be the most significant areas right now as far as the low 48 is concerned. Do have question marks about Lake Michigan though right now too, so very much interested in how this ends up playing out. Probably will not be streaming this though, because I'll be of course with my family as well, but plenty to keep track of in that regard here. So of course, as we mentioned before, we're going to talk about the temperatures in particular here. You can see it on this map that over towards the eastern half of the US, especially as we get into December in the 6 to 10 and also the 8 to 14 day outlook, very high probability of below average temperatures. Some significantly low temperatures, maybe even record lows possible in some places here, or getting very close to it at the very least. The probabilities that we're seeing is about 70 to 80%. Pretty impressive signal at this point here. A lot of the models have been agreeing with this for a while, so not really much of a surprise here. And the same thing being shown on the 8 to 14 day outlook, although the probabilities are a bit lower. December, I really think in general is going to be a wild card month, especially the first half of the month is going to be, looks like it could be really cold across the eastern half of the US here. Western half, we're going to actually switch over now. We've been pretty cold over there. Now we're going to start to warm up just a little bit. I wouldn't say it's anything significant by any stretch, but it's going to feel a little bit different than what you've been experiencing in recent time here. And this pattern does look like it's going to persist into the long range here as well. So for this section of the video, we're going to do things a little bit differently here. Normally we'll have the jet stream taking the forefront, and sometimes we'll have another feature or secondary jet stream map on the screen. Whereas this time, we're actually going to let the height anomaly take the forefront this time. The cold air masses over here and the lower pressure areas are going to be these areas in the blue, and we're also going to have these areas in the red here, which are warmer air masses, also higher pressure areas too to go along with it. So you're actually going to get to see what these air masses are doing in real time. It's a little bit better picture than what the jet stream is able to depict. It is a good source of how we can looking at wind flow at higher level or lower levels of the atmosphere. And we're still going to have that. We're going to have one right here. I think I'm going to put GFS here, and then I'm going to probably put Europe towards the top right hand corner of the screen. But in any case, we're going to go ahead and try to synchronize the timing of these as best as we can. And what I want you to pay attention to mainly on this map, and hopefully while this isn't too much for you to look at, you can kind of see how everything's moving at once. I'll try to move slowly, but as you can see here, there's two areas in particular I want you to pay attention to. It's this area right up here towards the North Pole, and this other one towards Greenland. So these two areas are oscillations, and they are key factors in allowing or emitting cold or warm air to move across the lower 48. These are two most prominent oscillations here. What you'll notice is we're kind of somewhat in maybe a slightly negative phase with the Arctic oscillation. Times we go positive, but we're mainly staying predominantly negative. The same thing exists over here towards the NAO, the North Atlantic oscillation towards Greenland, staying predominantly negative. With the NAO, typically, whenever we end up in a negative phase, the northeast tends to be colder. And also when we have that more predominantly negative phase over towards the AO, or the Arctic oscillation, allows for more cold air to drop south into North America. So you're seeing a perfect correlation with that, with those two rules that we have in effect here. You can see that a lot of cold air is making its way across the lower 48 and kind of sets itself up for the most part over the southeast in the short term, as well as the really just the eastern half of the U.S. Anywhere east of the Mississippi looks like it's cooler than average until we get towards the very end of this run, where we start to look like we begin to level out here. This seems like the most notable cold air mass, and that's going to be right around the 8th here. Then after that, you can finally start to see that warm air beginning to move. And we're also looking like we may be shifting into a more predominant positive phase on the NAO here. I'm going to go back again so you can see it from start to finish at a little bit higher little bit higher speed here. But you can see cold air masses dominant over the eastern half of the U.S. here. Here's that warm air mass beginning to move in a bit more, especially as we get into the 10-day time frame here. And then after a while, we finally begin to see a little bit of a pattern shift right before we get towards the back half of the month here. So pretty cold start to December ahead for the eastern half of the U.S. Eventually the west will catch up with some cooler temperatures, but it does look like in the short term some winter storms might be possible as well with this, based off what you were seeing with the jet stream maps as well. Still nothing concrete, but you see a lot of troughing going on in correlation with these areas of lower pressure and cold air masses to go with it. So in the short term, of course, with that, we talked about it a little bit ago, the lake effect snow machine is going to be where I'm going to be watching the most for those more notable snowfall totals, with those northern winds and those air temperatures being cooler than the lake surface or lakefront temperatures. I do think that at times we will have some opportunities for some lake effect snow, and I think a few notable totals are possible. I'm not expecting anything along the lines of blizzards right now, but we'll have to wait and see how things go. Lake effect snow is very difficult to forecast, so just take what I'm saying with a grain of salt right now. So as we go further along here, big topic of course has been the temperatures, and you can also take a look at the wind profile to go along with this. The surface winds combined with these cooler temperatures are going to create a big problem in regards to wind chills. Some areas in particular that I'm watching are going to be over towards the northern plains and maybe over towards the northeast as well. As we move this forward, you can see that those surface temperatures are dropping notably, particular as we get over towards North and South Dakota. We're getting well below zero now. We're getting into the lower teens in some spots here by the time we get towards the weekend. As we go further along, those frigid wind chills are moving off to the south and east a bit now. We're getting into maybe, I would say, the Great Lakes by the 5th and into the 6th at this point. This next rush of cold air is really going to leave its mark in regards to the wind chills in particular. And then on top of that, by the time we get towards the end of the model run here, we're starting to see those cold temperatures begin to dominate once again out west. Once we start to warm back up out towards the eastern half of the U.S. here, this is mainly going to be reserved to the deep south here in the southeast. But even then, we're kind of sitting right at average, if not just a little bit above. Depending on how this pans out here, I think in the future there could be chances of severe weather right now, but with as far out as we're looking at this point, it's a little bit too early to tell. But if you were to go ahead and look at the wind profiles to go along with it, I'm going to run this back one more time here just to make sure you can see it clearly. Here's the air temperature right here at the surface, and then our winds to go along with it really start to see an increase at this point over here towards the beginning of December, and as we go further along it only increases from that point. So those wind chills are going to be pretty significant, especially as we get past the weekend here. We may very well get to even see a few wind chill advisories before all is said and done. And here's us actually looking at the hard wind chill values themselves, and it's pretty notable what we end up finding here. Of course, over towards the northern plains is where those coldest wind chills are going to be. These would be almost classified as life-threatening at this point when you get to about 20 to 30 below. And the wind chills even go below freezing towards the deep south. We could even see some 20s before all of this is said and done here. So if you happen to work outside, you're happening to work early in the morning here, just make sure you're a little bit extra insulated at this point here. If you're staying inside, good time to get out the firewood and a hot cup of joe at this point. So lastly here, well, not lastly, but we're also going to go ahead and take a look at what our precipitation map could look like before all is said and done. Of course, we're looking at the GFS. As we mentioned, really tomorrow the lake effect machine starts to get going, but really doesn't take off until after this weekend here. You can already see that cold air starting to move in, and right around here, these little areas over here, let's say over towards Buffalo, maybe just to the east of Cleveland here, we're starting to see some more notable snowfall here. And you notice how that's all just kind of staying in place here. That's the lake effect machine getting started. And then from that point, as far as the picture is concerned, outside of the lake effect snow, it's pretty quiet, and it will probably stay that way for a little bit here until we get towards maybe the 5th. Might have a couple chances of some cold rain here and there towards the deep south. A small clipper system may come into play here towards the 5th and the afternoon of the 5th and the 6th. Not expecting anything major out of that. So go further along here, you can see where our storm track is. Eventually we start to see a little bit of a change once we get towards the 10th and the 11th. Maybe some shower and storm activity towards the evening of the 11th. Right now I'm not really thinking that's going to be amounting to much anything. A more notable, I would be kind of hard pressed to call this a signal right now, but a more notable look at a potential winter storm possible signal, I guess you could say, a probable signal, as we get towards the 13th here. So a lot to keep track of as we get into the long range here. With the new pattern shift expected to take place around this time frame, this can easily change, so take that with a grain of salt. So last but not least, let's go ahead and take a look at what our probable snowfall totals could be here. Northwest actually looks like it really calms down in regards to snowfall chances beyond Thanksgiving here. We kind of get a little bit of a break, which is honestly needed for a lot of these folks here. The atmospheric river that we've had over the last week and a half has been pretty grueling over towards this area. Notable damage has been reported here, and unfortunately there's even been loss of life. So this will be a little chance for them to clean up, which is always good. Then of course we're paying most of our attention, of course, as I mentioned before, over towards the Great Lakes, where the snowfall totals could be pretty impressive there. This is also the National Weather Service blend of models that we're looking at this point. So this is usually a happy medium between all of the models here. Some models tend to go a little bit more extreme, other ones tend to go a little bit more light, and with this one we usually will get a good balance. But to see totals within the 10-day range up to about 2 feet plus, that's actually quite an eye-opener here. So like I said, I think the lake effect machine is going to come in big time. Now of course we're not going to get this all in one day, so this is going to be progressive, but still some notable totals are expected over here nonetheless, it looks like. But we'll just have to see how things pan out from that point. But that being said, appreciate you guys' time. Hope you guys have a happy Thanksgiving, and I will see you in the next video. Take care and have an awesome rest of your day.